I learned about my dad's history pretty early because I saw it in action up until I was 8 and then into 10 years old. 8, he tried to get sober. By 10, he was getting sober. Then by 10 years old, he was in 12 steps, so he really wanted us to know what had happened to him. And he really wanted us to be aware that we loved him, that he had made mistakes, and he would probably make more. And also, when I was little before that, when he was in and out of prison, he was also in and out of homeless shelters. And there was a bus station down the street from us, and he would sleep there so he could be near us, even though he wasn't in a place where he could be in the home with us. And we'd spend weekends in homeless shelters with him, not the evenings, but we'd eat there and be present there and then go back to our home. And so there was nothing to hide. You couldn't hide it. So my dad was arrested 54 times, went to prison 4 times, and was in prison until I was 10, on and off, and then spent probably the rest of my childhood until I was a teenager in and out of rehab. He was a really present and beautiful and loving dad, but he was also an addict. And he always says, I'm a drug addict, an alcoholic, a liar, and a thief, and it gets worse when I'm drinking. So that is the truth. But his story started way before my story, maybe. So he went into the Navy to be a dentist. He was one of 10 children. He wanted to be a doctor. He didn't have the money for it. Graduated top of his class, and then chose this base in San Diego where all the black people were disappearing. And then he was told he would be next. And then his fellows in the unit came in the middle of the night, and they dragged him into the desert, and they buried him up to his neck, and they left him to die. And then one whose name was Hollywood, who was a white man who was an ally but couldn't be publicly to save his own life, came back, saved my father's life. From that point, my dad was on the run from the FBI for 6 months, brought back, had a tribunal, went on the run again from the FBI for 6 months, became best friends with the FBI agent who chased him. But by the time that was over, my father had a drug addiction, a record, and a dishonorable discharge from the Navy. And so by the time he came to me, he used to say I wasn't a criminal before I went to jail, which I think is true at this point, now that I've known him for so long and interviewed him and been present with his story. But by the time he got to me, he was a criminal. And so he spent a lot of my childhood robbing and stealing. I spent a lot of my childhood getting arrested with him, like being in the back of police cars or being kept at jails until someone could pick me up. But I also had a very loving and playful and adventurous, if you can imagine, childhood too. And my parents are very different. My dad was a Black Panther career criminal. My mother's family invented bubble wrap and brought Piggly Wiggly to the Midwest. So we had a really wild history